According to reporting from the outlet The Times, German investigators are skeptical that Russian naval ships sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines this past September and are pursuing leads that, quote, point to Ukrainian authorities. Professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, Jeffrey Sachs, joins us now to weigh in. Welcome, Professor Sachs.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
All right, so what do you make of this latest theory that it was, in fact, Ukrainian forces? And also feel free to reflect on that exchange in the airport that we watched a second ago.
Look, I think that Seymour Hersh is the go-to source for the moment until proven otherwise. And the U.S. had the means, the motive, the timing, the bragging, the predictions that said if Russia invades, Nord Stream's not going forward. And Seymour Hersh gave us a blow-by-blow account. He explained that there are disgruntled people in the intelligence community that really were not happy with this, and they came to him. And the fact of the matter is, it's obvious that there are disgruntled people in the intelligence community because they've been also feeding information to the Washington Post and others that don't blame the Russians for this. They've been basically telling us that every smokescreen that was put up is just a diversion by the White House and the Chancellor's office in Germany. It's pretty clear what happened.
Despite, yes, it being at least somewhat clear to a lot of us, the mainstream media has just been, from beginning with theorizing that Russia did it, even though there was no real motivation there. And as you pointed out, our own U.S. officials had suggested that something would happen to Nord Stream. I've seen you interviewed in multiple places, in mainstream places, where I think you're greeted with a lot of skepticism, if not outright hostility, for taking this, for being a credible person who nonetheless takes this position that is so contrary to what, all the mainstream expert in national security intelligence kind of people are asserting. What has that experience been like?
Look at Radek Sikorski in that clip. Look, it's just a smirk on his face. This is power. Power says you don't have to explain, you don't have to apologize, you just have to smile. They're playing a game with us. And in fact, people tell me from leading mainstream media saying the opposite. Yeah, Jeff, of course it's the U.S. Are you kidding? But we should be grown-ups because, actually we'll blow up the world if we just think that everything is a game, that you can just lie, you can just get away with anything. And unfortunately, that is the attitude. It's a kind of superciliousness or arrogance that says, we don't have to tell you. And the New York Times wouldn't even deign to mention Seymour Hersh for weeks. Their own great investigative reporter, they wouldn't even mention what he had reported because they're playing a game with us. And I know because people tell me privately what they feel versus what is said in the mainstream.
Yeah, that's so key, that people privately are conceding what you've been saying and what Seymour Hersh has been saying and what we've been saying, but publicly there's a total unwillingness to acknowledge basic reality. Is that because there's a fear of going against the administration's position that endlessly funding the Ukrainian resistance to Russia is an imperative national security objective that we will go along with, as long as it takes, even if it's an unreasonable goal that will just take us, forever or until the course of World War III or something like that?
It's a good question, which I try to understand myself every day. The New York Times, which used to be my go-to source from my youth onward, is miserable on the reporting on the war, on the reporting on Nord Stream. And there are different theories of why that is. One theory is that basically they're in cahoots with the U.S. government, and there's a lot to be said for that basic theory, and a lot of New York Times leaders have acknowledged that over decades. Yeah, we don't oppose the U.S. government on such things. Another idea is that in our social media world and in our subscription world, you don't make your base readers unhappy, that this would be uncomfortable. Ugh. A third is that they're just, basically saying nothing against Biden because they're afraid of Trump. And so this is just simple partisanship, and that if this were Trump doing these things, they'd have their reporters all out there on this. I don't know which of these is true, really, or whether it's some combination of all of these. But what I can tell you is the reporting's awful, because they're just not even reporting the real debate. They're just wanting their readers to see one thing. I don't think people believe this stuff. That's the other interesting thing about the government propaganda, which is relentless. People don't actually believe it, but it gives them a way, like Sikorsky just now, just to keep walking forward, just keep smiling, don't say a word. You don't have to talk to people like they're adults. Power is held by a small group, so we don't have to tell you anything. That's the real attitude of the government side, which is, we don't really care whether anyone believes it or not. It gives us something to say or not say, or a smile. This is really the attitude.
Do you think there are any cracks forming in the U.S. media's ability to basically paper over some of the realities that you're describing right now? I mean, some people believe that beginning to have reporting that says it might have been Ukrainians that did Nord Stream pipeline is like a slow creep toward an admission that obviously it wasn't Russia, a creeping admission that is U.S. or their allies, increasing pressure from countries like Germany, who are principally disadvantaged by the explosion of Nord Stream, rising frustration from the global south that has been very vocal in its refusal to go hook, line, and sinker along with this, and the consequences for food supply and the like that have come because of this conflict. Can you speak a little bit to the geopolitical tensions that might slowly be eroding the U.S. media's ability to paper over what is going on in the region?
Well, there is really a horrible dead end to the path that we're on, because the war in Ukraine is very expensive. It's not going right. It's not going the way the U.S., the Biden administration predicted. They thought they were just going to scare Putin away, or that the sanctions were going to do him in, or that Russia wouldn't mobilize and so forth. None of it has turned out to be the way that Newland and Sullivan and others expected it to be. So things are going badly. You look at the G7 that just met, almost all of them have miserable approval ratings, really low approval ratings. That's a political fact right now. And as much as they propagandize day by day realities on the battlefield, such as Russia's victory in Bakhmut after months at extremely heavy cost of lives and equipment, that's a reality. So now Biden's facing the re-election, and it's a very unpleasant position to be in. They don't know what to do. They're scrambling. So in this sense, there will be cracks that will open up a different kind of discussion, or they'll try to get a new line to freeze this thing somehow. They don't want to go into election year with massive spending on Ukraine, a battlefield at best stalemate, and at worst much worse than that. So I think they are facing realities that they haven't shared yet with the American people, but those who watch this closely can only imagine how uncomfortable this is for an administration that had a very different idea about how this was going to go down.
And incredible that the New York Times is still disguising some of those realities. We talked yesterday about 2 consecutive stories in the Times where they said, well, yes, Russia took Bakhmut, but at such a cost, it was almost a defeat. Well, they still took it, and what's the cost for Ukraine? Just a really, really terrible thing that's happening.
Robbie, I've had experience with the New York Times. They absolutely will not report facts right now. And not just that, whatever they think are the facts, they won't let other opinions on their pages to keep the debate open. It's really extremely disappointing to me that they think that they can feed one line without what is at a minimum a real debate over these issues. They don't want to have that.